Let's go.
This is what most days are like now for Dr. James Whitfield and his family.
I'd be lying if I told you that it didn't pain me to not be with the students that I typically get to serve each day.
Normally, he'd be up by 6 a.m. in a suit, ready to lead a school of about 2,000 kids. But since late August, he's been suspended from his job as the first black principal of Texas's majority-white Colleyville Heritage High School, in the wake of accusations that he was pushing critical race theory, or CRT, on students.
It has been difficult to be detached from really my purpose. And they see that, they see the pain, even though I try to mask it. But that's all I've ever wanted to do is be an educator and serve kids.
Ready?
He's become one of the most prominent casualties in a national war over race, history, and diversity. Psychologically, what's that like?
Yeah, it's, I go from different extremes. There's the part of me that goes, as any human, why me? Like, why is this? I didn't sign up for this.
Texas is one of 8 states with new broad laws banning the teaching of critical race theory, a decades-old graduate-level study examining the relationship between the law and racial inequality. But conservative organizers and parents have seized on the phrase, turning it into shorthand for lessons or programs they feel are un-American and could make white students feel guilt.
Right now, it's very trendy. I know that. It's very unpopular for me to be against it.
We should be teaching American pride, not to hate our country and to hate each other.
There's no evidence that Colleyville Heritage High or Dr. Whitfield taught critical race theory. When Whitfield became principal, parents claimed anniversary photos of him and his white wife, found in an old album on his Facebook page, were inappropriate. Others grew outraged after he took part in a district-approved presentation on diverse differences. Later, anger after he wrote an email about George Floyd's murder, stating systemic racism was alive and well. They flooded school board meetings, one resident accusing Whitfield by name.
Tonight, I would like to express my concerns, not only of myself, but of many in our community, about the implementation of critical race theory in our district, specifically the views and goals of the principal of Colleyville Heritage High School, James Whitfield. Later in this letter, he goes further,
Mr.
encouraging all members of our
Mr.
community.
Clark, yes. We really prefer that you don't criticize particular employee of the district.
Okay.
How about you fire him? How's that?
Sir.
How about you fire him?
Sir.
Because of this extreme views, I ask that a full review of Mr. Whitfield's tenure in our district be examined and that his contract be terminated effective immediately.
Much of the outrage focused on the views in his email. Clark and other parents calling for Whitfield's firing declined to speak with NBC News. Do you regret writing that email?
Absolutely not. Here in Fort Worth, we had a Tatiana Jefferson who had just been murdered in her home. You've got George Floyd, and I saw this moment, and I was just saying, I'm here with you to work towards that. We're gonna have uncomfortable conversations. I would write it again in a heartbeat.
In the hours and days after that school board meeting, did anyone stand up for you?
No. Behind the scenes, text messages, phone calls, voicemails. I'm so sorry that happened. We love you, like we support you, we've got your back. Nobody would say that publicly though.
200 miles away in Oklahoma, the state is facing the first ever federal lawsuit against an anti-CRT law, filed this week by the ACLU, arguing the law violates free speech. Educators at Millwood Public Schools in Oklahoma City have been working under a law nearly identical to the one in Texas that banned concepts that could make students feel discomfort or guilt. But at this majority black school, teachers like Miss Leandra Dokes aren't budging.
Let's go before the massacre, okay? What do you know about Greenwood, the city?
Today's lesson is about the Tulsa Race Massacre and how a white mob burned down black homes and businesses in a community called Greenwood in 1921.
Seeing the planes just makes you just terrified. Like, you probably are just sitting there, froze, just looking out, all the other businesses gone.
I would have felt a little bit of animosity towards them because it's the whole fact of the situation. It's like, you came into my hometown, killed my people, and then y'all gonna dispose of our bodies without a proper burial. Like, just the fact of it, that's crazy. Like, how you just gonna do this?
Her students are only in 8th grade, but intensely aware of the politics around them.
We're smarter than we look. We know what's happening in America.
You want to grow up to tell your kids about your story and not your kids tell them about your own.
At the end of the day, if you don't teach history, it's going to repeat itself.
Honestly, it's been like walking on eggshells. There are moments where I have to really be conscious of, am I getting as much from my students? I'm wondering, am I, or is this law causing me to hinder their education?
Is there a case to be made for, look, leave the tough, divisive concepts to parents at home, and at school, just stick to basic history?
That is, to me, is not going to solve anything. Those questions eventually come back to us. What they learn at home will definitely end up right where they are engaging with one another.
The law went into effect in July. Doak says she searched her syllabus, worried she'd violate it, but ultimately decided she wouldn't change. What do you think this debate about critical race theory is really about?
Control. Control over what can and cannot be taught. But is it really avoidable? That's the question. That's the one thing that I fear is like, why are we trying to avoid something they already see?
Good morning. Hey, Noah.
Cecilia Robinson Woods is Oklahoma's only black female superintendent. As the law went into effect, she placed Millwood teachers through 4 days of training to assure them their lessons aren't CRT, they're just history. Are you on an island?
I definitely believe that I'm on an island, which is one of the reasons I wanted to be in the school district. My board is all African American. They almost expect me to speak out because we know there's so many more that cannot.
A local conservative PAC published her photo in their newsletter, warning supporters, if we continue to allow these kinds of superintendents, there is no hope for the future. As someone who's been identified by conservatives as a potential problem, are you worried?
I'm not sure what I'd be worried about. I mean, I answer to a local school board, and I have the support of my school board.
But Millwood is the exception. Next door in Texas, several school districts are struggling to interpret new laws and protect employees. In Southlake, Texas, NBC News obtained exclusive audio of an administrator telling panicked teachers that they would comply with Texas law by balancing books about the Holocaust with an opposing view.
Make sure that if you have a book on the Holocaust, that you have one that has that has other.
How do you oppose the Holocaust?
Believe me, that's come up.
The district apologized, and the administrator in the audio has not responded. In Katy, Texas, the school canceled and then postponed an event with a prominent black children's book author.
So to be clear,
State Senator Brian Hughes is the author of Senate Bill 3, the second and most stringent of the anti-CRT laws passed in Texas. When you look at some of what's happening around the state right now, you don't think that any of this has gone off the rails?
Oh, I think folks need to focus on what's in the bill and not what's in other states or what they've heard or things like that. And if we were to tell little white children that they are inherently oppressors, that's not good. If we tell little children of color that they are inherently victims, neither one of those is good.
Was that the primary motivation for these laws, to make sure that white kids don't feel guilty?
So the bill is pretty clear. It would be wrong to tell white kids or children of color that they are limited based on the color of their skin, or that they are guilty because of what people of their race did in the past.
What about the teachers who say they're closing their classroom libraries, or Dr. Whitfield, the principal here who's about to lose his job?
I would just ask folks to look at the words of the bill. The words of the bill matter, not the Facebook memes.
But do you have a message to them? I mean, is there something that you can clarify at a statewide level?
So what we've said, I want to make sure this is clear. So what we do not teach in Texas public schools is that one race is inherently superior or inferior.
I understand that, but I want to know what you think of the current lives people are living as a result of this entire movement.
Well, I can't speak to the national movement about CRT or what other states are doing. All I can tell you is what's in Senate Bill 3.
A group of Colleyville Heritage High students have led classroom walkouts and spoken out at school board meetings.
Vote to keep my principal.
They fired the best principal that any of us have ever had in our entire life, just because he's the first black principal and they could get away with it.
By dismissing the concerns of students of color, they're guaranteeing that that kind of behavior and thought processes can continue living on.
Dr. Whitfield will have to defend himself at a public hearing on November 9th. In a statement to NBC News, the Grapevine-Colleyville School District said he violated district policies, and they proposed the non-renewal of Dr. Whitfield's contract due to deficiencies in his performance as principal that have been documented and discussed. The school district says that what's happened to you has nothing to do with critical race theory. Has this all just been a misunderstanding?
So it is interesting that they would say that. Promoted me twice in the last 3 years. What's changed? Do have the Father for all of you.
Until the hearing, he'll be waiting at home. And if he loses, where does your family go from here?
We talked about that. And that's the thing, that's what gives me anxiety. I don't, like, where do we go from here? Like, you've worked so hard to be where you're at. And that's what I thought he was gonna retire out there. Like, I thought this was it.
Every morning, Whitfield takes his 9-year-old son, Landon, to school.
Love you, dude. Have a great day, buddy.
Yeah, great day.
Thank you.
Have the best day.
You have the best day.
The building is right across the street from where just a few weeks ago he was principal.
I'm usually parking right there. We see where that gray truck is. So that gray truck, that's my spot.
Now, this is as close as he's allowed to go without trespassing.
My God.
Sorry, what happened to you?
How you do? Oh man, it's all good. It's good to see you. It's good to see you.
Oh, I hope how are you back?
Hey, I love you. I love you.
How does that feel?
Oh,
I mean, you're just standing here for all of 60 seconds and people are honking at you.
I've got goosebumps. I think most of these people, they know what I'm about, right? They've seen, how I treat them, how I treat their students. And so it feels good to have that love and support.
After you drop your son off in the morning and you drive back home, what does that feel like?
It's almost defeating. As I'm dropping him off and then I'm driving back home, it just feels like I'm missing out on doing what I've been called to do. It's discouraging, but I just try to keep framing it as this is paving the way for something that's greater, but it's hard to see at times, It's hard to see. It's like I'm doing a pass by instead of going in and doing what I've been called to do.
Antonia Hylton traveled to the community and joins me now with her exclusive reporting. Antonia, good to see you. Talk us through what's going on here.
Hey, Hallie. Dr. Kenitra Easy started her job back in the summer of 2021, and she told me that almost immediately she realized that this was an incredibly divided community. One school that was majority white, one school that's majority black, and that the black school had all the remedial programming. It had a gym that hadn't had AC for almost 7 years, while the white school had much better facilities and it had all of the gifted and talented programming. Dr. Easy says she tried to do something about that, and now black students, colleagues, and Dr. Easy are saying that she's been targeted for it. Take a look at her story. Nadesha Jones is a straight-A student at Mississippi's Bay Springs High. Lately, she and her friends have become activists, questioning the school board's decision to place their district's first black superintendent, Dr. Kenitra Easy, on leave less than a year after she was hired.
The only thing that was ever surprising to me was the fact that we ever got a black superintendent that brought out all the disparities, all the discrimination that has been going on.
Was it important to black students to see the first ever black superintendent?
Yes, it was very.
According to Dr. Easy, trouble began soon after she took the reins of the rural Mississippi school district. She describes as separate but unequal. The district's gifted and talented programming is at the predominantly white Stringer K-12 campus. The remedial programming at predominantly black Bay Springs schools.
Students at Bay Springs would take drug education, whereas students at Stringer would take theater.
And Dr. Easy was concerned about the condition of Bay Springs facilities. There was no AC in the school's gym for almost 7 years. Dr. Easy says she wanted to make Bay Springs equal to Stringer in building and program quality. She proposed placing a new district-wide pre-K program in Bay Springs. Stringer parents objected, calling the 10 to 20-minute drive too far. One parent sent Dr. Easy an anonymous letter.
The parent told me that I was being watched very, very closely, that I had no right to try to make changes.
When you look back at that letter now, was it prophetic?
It was absolutely. When I was hired, I was told, don't poke the bear. And Stringer, leave Stringer alone.
Then, on March 3rd, the school board called a special meeting. Multiple white employees spoke out against Dr. Easy, some saying she'd created a hostile work environment. Black employees spoke in her support.
Is this about race?
I didn't want this to be about race, but the facts are about 20 white employees came forth with concerns about the first Black superintendent in the district.
The board voted to place Dr. Easy on paid leave pending termination. She says within minutes her email was deactivated, and the next morning her office had new locks.
Hi, my name is Antonia Hylton. I'm with NBC News.
NBC News placed numerous calls and emails to district and state officials. All refused to provide any comment for our story. One Stringer parent spoke to us outside the local post office.
Are you at all surprised that it looks like she's losing her job less than a year into it?
Yeah, and I think she was causing, it seemed like from what I hear, is causing problems as soon as she come into it.
Do you think this would be happening if she were a white man?
No, I don't know. I think they need to get off the racism thing, just get along and do your job.
Dr. Easy is still waiting for a hearing. She's been replaced by a white acting superintendent. Student activist Nadesha still hopes Dr. Easy will be reinstated, but with every passing week, doubts grow.
We have to fight so the people that come after us don't have to go through the same thing we're going through.
Hallie, Dr. Easy is not only waiting for a hearing, but she told us that she still has not received a letter or an email outlining exactly why the district is actually moving toward firing her. So she feels right now like she's completely in the dark. Not only that, but she says that she's been experiencing some hostility in the community, that she went to a recent baseball game and was asked by the Stringer principal to leave part of the premises. And NBC News actually obtained video of this incident that just shows how much this tension has spilled over through the entire community. But now we're in the summer. She should be preparing for the next school year, and she still does not know about the status of her job, Hallie.
Eventually, Raven's complaint reached Principal Sean Duhan. Duhan, who's white, had been principal at Carroll Senior High since 2012, and this wasn't the first time he'd had to deal with a report of kids using racial slurs at school. This time, he called both Raven and the white student, who we are not naming, down to his office. That's when Raven secretly hit record on her cell phone.
Come on in, have a seat. Yes, sir.
Under Texas law, you're not required to notify someone when you're recording them. At first, the boy denied using the N-word. He said he was just having a conversation with other students about why it's racist that only Black people are allowed to say it. Raven, 17 at the time, grilled him.
Right, so how, if that's your opinion on the word...
No, but I don't use it.
No, let me finish. If that's your opinion on the word, which you did use in the sentence when you were explaining it, then why would you lie about saying it today?
Well, because I don't, that's not
you
like
do
in
use
my
the word,
vocabulary.
though. It is in your vocabulary, because I've heard you say it multiple times.
As you know, it's back to school season, and this morning we are focusing on families making a different choice when it comes to their kids' education.
The pandemic kept most young students away from school at first until COVID rates fell and vaccines for kids became widely available. But for a growing number of Black parents, they've decided to keep their kids out of the classroom for good.
NBC News correspondent Antonia Hylton traveled to New Jersey and Detroit to meet some folks who are part of that shift. Good morning to you.
Good morning, guys. The families I met with say their problems with existing public school systems didn't start with the pandemic, but COVID shutdowns gave them a good excuse to walk away. Take a look.
You guys want to feed some animals?
It may look like a simple summer outing, but these kids are at Terhune Orchards in New Jersey for a full day of school. Here, they'll learn about animals, produce, farm operations, and flowers.
Good job, Maxwell.
What was the best part of today?
Feeding the animals still. Feeding the animals.
These kids are part of the Melanin Village, a collective of Black families that homeschool. Parents work to make learning engaging and warm for their kids after years of feeling let down by public schools. Before the pandemic, only 3% of Black students were homeschooled. By 2021, it shot up to 16%.
Who wants to do it?
Many, like Brennea Fairchilds, say they aren't going back.
There's a joke amongst homeschoolers that we homeschool, but we're never home.
When did you decide that this is what you wanted for your kids?
I would say homeschooling has been both a heart and a head decision for me. I looked at the presentation of slavery and the Civil War in U.S. history textbooks, and I saw that, okay, it's not accurate. There you go.
Fairchild's founded the Melanin Village to share school materials and organize group activities with families like hers. Many frustrated that their kids weren't taught diverse history, rarely had teachers who looked like them, or got disciplined at higher rates.
We're nationwide, right? So we're not just these moms here in New Jersey, but we've got a great group of moms in Arizona, in the Chicago area, in Florida. Like, this has really surpassed my dreams.
Village moms say their kids often felt isolated or disconnected in traditional school.
Do you want to go to regular school?
No.
Not one person.
For a whole entire day, no.
In Detroit, moms Bernita Bradley and Sharice Powell say their homeschooling group, Engage Detroit, has 98 families on the roster. They expect 20 more to join before this school year begins.
We don't have times when you've seen generations after generations fail. We don't have time to keep waiting.
Do you think the schools are serving black children?
Schools were never designed to serve black children.
And we would tell them, basically help them understand our students, and we would tell them that our children are brilliant. It's just that you all don't try to get to know them. You don't try to get to know, like, how do they learn.
Dr. Cheryl Field-Smith has studied black homeschoolers for 17 years.
We pushed really hard to get into these public schools, and now the fact that we're pulling it out, we need to pay attention to that.
As black families perhaps exit public school systems, for the black kids who get left behind, what's going to be there for them?
Not only do I worry about that, but also black home educators worry about that.
At 15, Victoria asked her mom, Bernita, to take her out of Detroit schools. She says she was being bullied relentlessly for her appearance, and it didn't seem like her administrators cared.
It made me not want to ask questions, or not want to ask specific questions because I'm like, am I they going to call me dumb?
When you transitioned to homeschooling, how did you start to feel about yourself?
I felt more confident. It was just kind of like a sunshine, like the clouds opening a little bit.
Victoria recently graduated and joined AmeriCorps. Her mom continues to help parents like Sharice, whose 14-year-old Tori needs extra support.
Okay, so the boy is eating ice cream. Excellent, excellent. Good job.
You give your daughter so much love and attention. Was she getting this in public school?
No. No, of course, not to this level.
The families of the Melanin Village and Engage Detroit hope that their groups inspire school systems to get creative, take kids out of rigid routines, and ensure they are welcoming all kinds of learners.
Do you think the schools are going to listen? I mean, the system, does it see what's happening?
I think on individual scales that yes, that there are schools who will. Now, if we're talking about the system overall, I think that gets into things that are a bit deeper. I don't want my child to be the guinea pig in the midst of us still figuring this out.
Some parents make this work by doing school on a very different schedule. Homeschooling doesn't have to be from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. They can work around each other's jobs and do most of their lessons in the afternoon. Some even do lessons on weekend days if that's what's best for them.
Which brings us to a top challenge in schools themselves, finding enough teachers, especially amid growing cultural fights. Antonia Hylton returns to Southlake, Texas, where school began this week.
For 7 years, Adam Burns loved his job as a middle school technology teacher in Southlake's Carroll school system.
Hey, cutie pie.
But after members of a conservative political action committee won the majority of seats on the school board, and Texas passed laws restricting how teachers could address racism in the classroom, Adam and his wife, Brandy, who's black, thought of their 11-year-old son.
Did you feel like you could be true to yourself and stay in this job?
No, not at all.
Adam quit in July, but says Carroll schools haven't found his replacement, and his contract requires him to stay until they do.
My message to other teachers would be to be true to yourself. For the district, I would just say it's time to start listening to the people that you employ.
Given exhaustion and stress from the COVID pandemic, one survey finds as many as 55% of America's educators are considering leaving the profession. In Southlake, Texas, NBC News has covered extensively conflicts and an active federal civil rights investigation into the treatment of minority and LGBTQ children in the Carroll district. 93 out of 577 teachers left that district last year.
Here's 3 teachers that
3 really good teachers.
Amazing teachers.
I mean, kids loved us and kids learned from us.
Tim Hamilton taught Spanish for 9 years. A group of residents became outraged after he wore a Black Lives Matter mask and posted about his beliefs on Facebook. Administrators demoted him, and Tim refused to work the new position.
And the almost decade that I spent in the district, that was worthless. That meant nothing to them.
Carroll Schools did not comment on any personnel matters regarding the teachers we spoke with. Kim Ross quit last spring after teaching algebra for 13 years.
Part of what we saw and what was happening that kind of made us go, I don't think I can do this anymore, at least for now.
They might fire you for doing this interview.
Well, they can't fire me because I quit.
A new survey found that 70% of Texas teachers are considering leaving the profession entirely, the highest number ever recorded since the survey began in 1980. Ovidia Molina is the president of the Texas State Teachers Association.
Educators are feeling less support, not just from the elected officials who we felt for a long time, but also seeing an increase of lack of support from our parents because of all the political rhetoric that is being thrown around about who we are.
If this continues, what's going to happen to the public schools?
We're going to see a lot more classrooms without teachers. And we're going to see even less people wanting to come into education.
Despite losing 16% of its teachers last year, the Carroll District says it has only 3 open positions currently, which it expects to fill shortly, and it is implementing raises and instructional coaches to help those still there. Adam hopes that his colleagues and his young son understand why he chose to speak out.
Does it upset you to think that this might be the end of the road for you with teaching?
It was a big leap for myself and my family for me to do this, and realizing that I don't feel like there's really a place for me. It's really tough.
Antonia Hylton, NBC News, Southlake, Texas.
My name is Cynthia. I'm executive director of the New Rural Project.
This is how Cynthia Wallace spends many of her weekends.
Oh, right here. Okay.
She throws on a New Rural Project tee and a pair of sneakers. Then she knocks on strangers' doors or meets them on the street and listens.
Did you get a chance to vote?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you are a strong voter?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you able to vote last year?
No, I didn't vote last year.
Okay. Well, that's what we're here talking about.
Oh, okay.
It may sound like a simple act, but for Black residents in rural Anson County, North Carolina, this kind of visit from a civic group is rare.
You got a little pocket in there? I'm just piling you up.
In recent years, voter participation has been slipping. Jobs have gone. Many residents feel like nobody cares about what they have to say.
What do you worry about every day?
Violence, poverty, just things that can be improved.
National Democrats have raised alarms about support slipping in rural America over the last 2 decades, where Donald Trump won roughly 2/3 of the rural vote. Here in Anson, 2,500 voters of color sat out the last election, as a state Supreme Court seat was decided by 401 votes out of 5 million cast. To Cynthia, the disconnect isn't rocket science. Few do what her team does in the rural South. Even worse, they sometimes forget Black people live there.
Do you feel like you've seen the changes that you deserve here?
You know, in Anson County, those young men, Black men under 40, turned out at 35% in the 2020 general election. And so actually having a chance to have conversation with them, and the fact that they really seem to feel, kind of validated to be heard.
Black voters in Anson say that they've received this message that their voice just doesn't matter on the local stage or at the national level. And, that stat that 2,500 voters just in that one small county sat out in 2020 while a race was decided by about 400 or so votes. I mean, you can see right there the power that they could have had, and they're just not receiving that message. So that's what groups like the New Rural Project are now trying to change.